Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to learn about CSS selectors. Now, in our previous video, we learned about CSS, adding CSS, how to add CSS. And we have learned about the inline, the internal, and the external. Now, we are going to learn about selectors. Now, in CSS, when we say selectors, what is selectors at all? In selectors, we already learned that CSS code are being applied in HTML. So it brings us the layouts and the colors in HTML. So we apply CSS in HTML. Now, the question is, where do we apply those rules? The CSS rules or the CSS design? So let's say the CSS rules, where do we apply it? In the HTML. We know HTML contains element tags. So where do you want to apply them? So where we want to apply these stars or these rules is the selector. So it's what we call selector. So where if you want to apply, so for example, if you take this one, we have H1, and then we have our curly brackets with color and then gold, which terminated and then it's closed. Now what this rule means is that this property, which is the color is a property and the value gold, this rule is going to be applied to H1. So H1 is a selector. It means we are applying the rule to the selector element of H1. So that's the selector. So where the rule is going to apply is called the selector. Selectors are what rules is going to apply. Now that we know selectors, we already learned that in HTML rules, you have the selector with the curly brackets, the properties, the values, followed by the semicolon. In everything, like every time you follow by the semi after the value, and then you close your curly brackets and you make sure all the property, including the values, are in lowercase. All right. So let's see a few selectors now. If you take this code very well here, where we have P, we have the P in here. This P has CSS rule in there. So this rule will be applied to all P paragraph in there. So this one we call it element selector. All elements will have this color. So let's get one demonstration and see how it works. We open our editor, and then in our body tag, you can come here and then open. Example, maybe H2, and then we put here red. Then we come here, another H2, we put in green, and then maybe last but not the least, we put in here maybe blue in here. Now using the external CSS, which we already done a link. If I come here and then I write a selector, I pick a selector which is H2, and I bring my curly brackets and I say color, which means I want to change the font color of the H2. Bring my column and I give it a color like brown and terminate it, save it. If I run this code, what happened? What do you think will happen? All right. So in your thinking, let's see what will happen in the code. Now, if I run this code, if we run the code, we're supposed to get all H2 in. So let's check our code out again. Make sure you save your code in here. So when we run it, if you have a preview, you can run it in there. So we see that all the H2 has turned to a brown color, but maybe we wanted this to have only a brown color or a red one. So let's say we change it to red, and let's see, we want only the first H2 to be red. But if I put in red, in here, and I save. I go to output in, I click, see that all the H2 has changed to red. Now, why? Because the element selector was H2, and it means all H2 will have this row, So if so, this one we call it element selector. We have selected all the elements A2. So every element with A2 will have this rule. So what about if you want each of these A2 to have a different color? All right. So now that we know the element selector, so let me comment on this one. This is called the element selector. So we comment with our backslash and then our hash key, and then we say it's element selector. So this one is the element selector. It's selecting all the elements in there. So we close our hash and our backslash in there. All right. Now, another element that I want to introduce is a class selector. Another selector that I want to talk about is a class selector. So we have the class selector. Now for the class selector, if you want to create a class, it starts with a dot and the name of the class. So this one, we are going to apply the class to an element that we want to apply this rule. So if I say maybe red underscore or dash heading in here, and I bring my curly bracket, so you give it any name of your class, and then I say color in here, so I give it a blue color. So let me change this one, the red into blue, so blue heading, and then you make sure you terminate it. So when you save this one, when we go to our HTML, and then where we want to apply that class selector. So if I want to apply this H2, or what I'll do is I'll just do class. So we is like an attribute. We are given an attribute to the H2. And because we created a class, so we need to say class. And then equal to, there are double quotes. As we know, attributes have a double quote. And then you make sure the name is supposed to be exactly the class name that we created here. So you can just copy and come and paste in here. So I put in the name here and save. So when I do this, this rule will be applied to where I've inserted a class in there, and we've inserted the class into this A2 attribute. So this A2 will have a different color. So let's see. Now we know all of them are having red. So when I refresh it, it's changed to blue. So this is how the class works. When you create a class, whatever you call the class, so you can call it as many places that you want. So let's see. Let's go back to our editor. If I come here and I do paragraph, and I say this my web app. Now, if I come here in this attribute, leave a space and you call the attribute a class, and you give it button and you call the class name, which we know heading blue heading, and I save it because we apply this class here, the elements paragraph tag will change to a blue. So let's check that one. Yes, so it has changed to whatever you call this element, this class, the rule is being applied in there. So that's how the class works. Now I want us to introduce another selector. Now we have what we call the ID selector. So the ID selector. So I'm going to comment and then say ID selector. So I close it. Now the ID selector it starts with the pound sign or the hash key. So the pound sign. All right, and then followed by the ID name. So you can give it any ID name. So you can also say, example, maybe main, and then you give your bracket. You can come here and say color, and then you can give a color, maybe mauve, or we can get the more color here. So let me give it maybe green in here. So if I give me, I want to change it to the color code name. So I'll click here and change it. So this is a color code name. We'll learn about that one. All right. Now when I save this one and I come to my HTML and I come and call an ID, so I leave a space and I say ID equal to the ID name is main. So when I save it, I'm expecting this blue to change to green, the text blue. So let's see in our outcome in a browser. So what do you think to change to? So as you can see, that's changed to green. So this is how the ID works. Now, maybe you were thinking, "Oh, what is the difference between the ID and the class?" Now, for a class, you can call many class. You can call many class in the same. You can call the same class, the same class. So this one you have a blue heading in many elemental. So you see that we have called a class here. We have called a class here in the heading 2 here. If you can see where we have the blue heading, and I've called also in a paragraph in here the same class name blue heading. So you can call many class inside an elemental. So many class can be called in different elemental. So you can call the same class in different elemental, the same class in different elemental. So that's at the class. And now for ID, you can call the ID. So we have one ID here. So this ID can be used once in one element. So it can be used once in one element. So this we can't use this ID again in case I open a paragraph in here and I say hope is assurance of faith. If I want to call the ID here, it's not allowed to do that. The same ID here, main. So you can't call the same ID inside a different element tag. You can't call the same ID. So like the H1, you see H1 is used once in a page. So in that same way, an ID is a unique and it can be used once in one element. It can be used once in one element in a page. But however, this ID can be used in a different page but once in an element. So we can create another class. Again, we can create another class and call it in the same page, but it can be used once in an elemental. So if I come here and create a class and I say hope, and I put in here color to change the font color, and I look for a color, maybe um let me get a color, maybe blue violet, and I terminate it. So I can come and call the same another different ID, but in the same page again. So I come here, and then instead of having the main, which I said is wrong, we put the hope here. So IDs are unique. It's used only once in an element tag, but you can create many IDs in a page. You can create many IDs in a page, but it's used once in an element tag. So this ID that has been used, it cannot be used again in a different element. But however, you can create more IDs and use them. But IDs are unique for a particular element. They are unique in there. So that's a difference. A class can be used in several elemental. in the same page. An ID can be used once in a page in an element, but you can have multiple IDs, but it can be used only once and it's unique. You know, IDs are unique. So like a student number, it can be used in once. But you can be in different, you can be in different classes, different pages, but it's used once in a class within a page. So that's the difference between ID. Now I'm going to introduce you to another selector. And this one, we call it the attribute selector. That's what we call the attribute selector. So that's what I'm going to introduce into the attribute selector. Now, this attribute selector, how do we use it? So the attribute selector are used, as we have learned about attributes, elements that has an attribute. So for example, if I have an anchor tag, href, so we know this one is an attribute, and I put in ampersand in here, then I put in hope, and then I have another anchor tag href, then I come and close it, and then maybe give it like fit in here. So this one I can come here and come and give it a target, so you know what a target is. So the target is where do you want the href to open, is in the same page or in a different. So if I did blank, so we have self, top, and parent. So I want blank, it to open a new tab. So if I save it, these two are the same anchor tag, but one is having more. So this one's having a target. It's have more attributes. So if I want to give this one a different color, so I can use the attributes. So I can come here and with the attribute, I can just say a tag using the element selector. But with this one attribute, I bring my square brackets and I'll say targets. So I will just say targets, and then I'll bring my curly brackets and I press down so that it to be well structured in the indented. I say color and I put in red in here, and then I do another anchor tag in here, and this one with no attributes, I bring my brackets and I say color in here, and then I bring my column and I say green, and I terminate it, I save. So what do we think will be the outcome? So let's see how the attributes work. So when I open our outcome and refresh it, so here is it. Here is our anchor tag that we created in there. You can see that one is green and one is red. Why? Because we use the attribute to target them differently. Even though they are all anchor tag, but because of this attributes, the targets. So some like sometimes I can even just use this attribute, the add ref, to give it a particular rule. Maybe you can say, oh, anchor tag with this ref, you give it an attribute. So anchor tag that has an attribute, you can use that one to also give it a rule, and then we call it the attribute selector. So that's the attribute selector, using the attribute to do that. All right. So let now, and last but not the least, we'll go into more. So the next selector I want to talk about, which is the last, is the universal selector. So we have the universal. I'm going to comment on the selector. All right. So how does the universal selector work? Now, universal selectors just only starts with the ASCII key or the star, and then you bring your curly brackets, then you put in your rule. So how the universal starts? This one, it's applied to all elements, not specified. All elements. So if I come here and I say, example, I say color, and I say black in there. So this one to apply to all elements, all elements. So what do you think will be the outcome of our course? So let's see. This one apply to all elements. So you have a rule that you want to apply to all elements. They use the universal with the hash key, and then you bring your curly brackets, and that's a universal. So if we open our code, let's see the outcome, refresh it, and then we say, let me go and save it well again. So we save it in there, and then apply to all elements. So we go in, refresh our code, and then okay. So let me check the code again. So the universal apply to all elements in there. Let me change to a color that will be okay, and then in there. So let's see. All right. So let's go to our code, and then all right. So where's the cursor? So let's go back to our code, HTML code. Now let me remove these ones and the ones that are good. So let me see. Let's create some different elements because the other element I've given them some attributes. So if it's so let's see this one. So I can say good even everyone. Good even. I have another paragraph in there. And I say hi or hello world. Hello, welcome to computer science. So I save it. All right, so let's see our outcome first. I'll refresh it. All right, so let's go down then. Let's check our the universal again. So let me give it a different color because black by default. So let me change the color in to a color that we have not chosen in here. So let's say a light green in here. So let me change it to a color code in here, and then let's see the outcome. So let's see how the universal work in here. So we are going to see our outcome, and then refresh it. So if you can see, all the paragraph have changed in there. So if you have a rule that you want to apply to all the elements, then we use the universal. So universal affects all elements in there. All elements in there. We'll talk about why the other one didn't change in later on our next video. All right. So but universal apply to all elements. Where you have a rule you want to apply to all the elements, you go in for the universal. So universal apply to all the elements in the HTML. All right. So thank you for today. If you have any comments, put on the comment section. You like the video as you watch. And thank you. God bless you. Have a nice day. Bye bye.